A landlord in Santa Barbara, California wants to do a complete renovation of their property, but the tenants say it's not fair that they have to be kicked out, even though the landlord says there won't be any electricity, running water, or maybe even walls in their units. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of the state of California, and specifically out of Santa Barbara, California. So they have a law in place that prevents landlords from being able to, what they call, do renovictions. So they're evicting tenants so that they can do renovations, unless the work is so substantial that it would be impossible for the tenant to be able to stay there. So we have a case where we have a landlord who is doing a full renovation of the property where there's not going to be any electricity or running water or anything. And the tenants are saying, hey, it's not fair that we're going to be kicked out of here. Okay, it's not fair that we lose our housing so that this landlord can do whatever they want with their property. You know what? And I think it's garbage. I think it's complete garbage. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't suck. It does suck for the tenants. However, you cannot expect to live somewhere forever and the landlord never able to do any repairs, any renovations, or improve the property in any way so that you can maintain your cheap rent forever. Because that's what they want. They want to be able to maintain their cheap rent forever, never have to move, and the landlord just be stuck with them. And the landlord is saying, listen, I need to fix this property up, period. So you have to go. It's going to take longer than the, I believe it's 60-day window that they give them. You know, they say, hey, if the renovation is going to take less than 60 days, then you have to allow those tenants to come back. But if it takes longer than that period of time, which in California, just getting permits takes longer than that, okay, then they have to be, you know, you're able to evict those tenants. So, you know, obviously this isn't an issue in places like where I live, where I invest here in Omaha, Nebraska, because if I don't want my tenants in there so that I can do a renovation, I'm just not going to renew their lease. That's not an eviction. That's just me not renewing their lease. And then, you know, in fact, I don't even have to do that. The tenant will likely move out after a few years and I'll be able to do a renovation during regular tenant turnover. Now, in California and places like that where the tenants stay forever, it's very, very difficult. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So do you believe a landlord should have the right to, you know, evict a tenant so that they can do renovations to a property? Now, obviously, you know what I think. I'm a landlord. I'm always going to say, yes, the property owner has the right to be able to fix their property up and shouldn't be forced to renew the lease on anybody. But, you know, laws in other places, and I think they're dumb laws, but it is the law. It is the law, and I always say abide by the rules in the places where you're investing. So what do you think of this whole situation? Put a comment in the comment section down below. Let's get into the article. This article is coming from kcbx.org, and it says, Santa Barbara tenants and landlords go to eviction trial over renovation dispute. Let's read about the details. A group of longtime tenants living at a nearly century-old property in Santa Barbara is facing possible eviction as a legal dispute heads to trial at the end of the month. This is the first time a new Santa Barbara city ordinance governing renovation eviction procedures will be tested in Santa Barbara County Superior Court. The case centers on 215 Bath Street, where property owners say severe structural and safety issues have made the buildings uninhabitable. Lacey Taylor, an attorney representing the landlords, said her clients issued 60-day notices to vacate to begin major renovations. The statute allows for a landlord to terminate a tenancy if the work is going to take at least 30 days to complete and that the tenant cannot remain in possession safely during the work, Taylor said. There's no way. It's not even a close call as to whether the tenants could remain in a property that has no plumbing, no electricity, holes in the floor, and not to mention hazardous materials. And Very common, okay? I've done complete renovations of properties that I've owned before, and there was absolutely no way that anybody could have lived in the property because they were uninhabitable. The only thing that I even left attached was the toilet so that people could use the bathroom while they were doing the renovations. But other than that, I mean, even that, I had to take the toilet out at a certain point because that bathroom needed to be redone as well. So, yeah, if they're talking about doing major structural work, I can't imagine, especially when we're talking about permitting, when we're talking about, architects, when we're talking about, everything in totality, it definitely will take longer than 30 days. Okay, I thought it was 60 days earlier, but I think I was thinking of in the article where they say the 60-day notice to vacate. Okay, so my bad. I don't know California law. I only know what I read. Okay. But anyway, to me, it makes no sense whatsoever that these tenants, yes, obviously they have a desire to stay, but they need to face the writing on the wall. Simply put, this place is being gut renovation. It is going to take longer than this period of time. They're going to have to go. Now, keeping that in mind, I know the way things work in California, and it is very likely that this process will be dragged out as long as possible by the very, very tenant-friendly anti-landlord eviction court system there. So even though they gave the proper notice and everything was probably done right, they probably will have to wait much, much longer than what the law specifies. And these tenants, if they ever get kicked out at all, will be able to stay for much, much, much longer. Okay, so we'll see. We'll see. That's all I can say. Taylor added that the delays have driven up costs and kept much-needed rentals off the market. Attorneys representing the tenants argue the notices were improperly delivered and failed to consider the language needs of residents, many of whom are monolingual Spanish speakers. They also point to a recent city ordinance designed to prevent so-called renovictions, where tenants are displaced under the guise of remodeling. And the ordinance, I'm sure, was put into place for people who were faking renovations, but it's pretty easy to prove renovations that are going to need more than 30 days. Like, I've done a single family house and it's taken me longer than 30 days for the renovation, and part of it was I was having issues with contractors, and sometimes the contractors were having issues finding the right materials, and in a best case scenario, you would have all the contractors immediately ready. At this second, you'd have all the permits ready. At the second, you'd have all the materials, everything, and they would just come in this huge team and renovate the unit in like a week. And I've heard of people who flip houses who are able to do that, right? But for everybody else who isn't constantly flipping houses or who doesn't have a full team working to get this sort of thing done, it's not going to be possible. Okay, it's just not. So, speaking in terms of reality, these tenants are going to have to move. They're going to have to leave. And if it takes longer than the specified time period, then I believe the landlord is in the right. It sucks. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't suck. If I was one of these tenants, I'd be pretty mad too, especially when you're in California where it is extremely hard to find housing and housing is very expensive. But that's part of the reason also why I would never live there. Okay, I would never live there because of these housing issues. And I don't believe that the extra costs are worth the benefit of whatever the benefit is of California. In response to the notices, tenants formed an association to educate one another about their rights and advocate against what they believe is unlawful displacement. The upcoming trial is expected to determine whether the property owners acted in good faith, issued legally sufficient notice, and whether the tenants must vacate their homes. It will also test how recent local and state laws apply to cases involving substantial housing renovations. You know what the ultimate goal of these tenants is? They want to make it so you can never renovate. Okay? They want to make it so that you can never evict a tenant for any reason whatsoever. You can't raise the rent Basically, you have to house them, even if you're losing money, forever. I mean, you are the homeless shelter, the social service provider. You are the one who is supposed to take care of them like you're their parents or something. And the things that I talk about on this channel, I'm always advocating for personal responsibility. These people have to take care of themselves. You cannot depend on the government to make sure that your rent is cheap forever. You cannot depend on the landlord to subsidize your living forever. You have to take care of yourself. You have to face reality. That's the way things work. If you can't afford to live in California, you got to move out of California, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Anyway, put a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think.